Alright, Travis Wayne Goodsell. Mormons, allow me to demonstrate how unsound your arguments are for, in this case, it'll be church history, the martyrdom of Joseph Smith. The church has presented their version of how it went, and you Mormons perpetuate this to other people. Oh yeah, Joseph was killed by the mob and at Carthage jail and blah blah blah. Well, there's more to the story, obviously. There are other things that were involved that confuse the story and lead to more questions. And so let's take a look at the church's version, and I'll show you how wrong it is, how it doesn't work, it's unsound. Okay, you have Joseph Smith in jail. We won't go into why and what he was doing there, but both Joseph and Hiram were the ones who were arrested and being held in the jail. John Taylor and Willard Richards were not under arrest. They were just there. And we won't get into the research details that a person should be asking themselves and searching for answers to about who they were and what they were doing in the church and why they were there. And so what we currently know from what the church has released, and we won't get into Oakes's book that he published talking about the guns that were involved. That becomes a further speculation of more unsoundness, as Mormons have to change their story again and again as more facts are accepted by the church and presented. And that you can't do that, Mormons. You have to throw away your theory, and you have to do the actual research on each and every single aspect of an event. So what you have is the four of them in the room on the second floor of the Carthage jail. The story goes that the mob rushes upstairs and they all try to push the door shut because apparently there was no locks on it. And the mob was all gathered there at the door trying to push in the door, and they had their rifles and they were sticking them through the door, and John Taylor was batting them down with his cane. This is the story the church is presenting, that Mormons have been perpetuating. I can show you the Mormon videos on YouTube by regular Mormons who are trying to tell the story themselves. And so then a shot blasts through the door and hits Hiram right below the eye, closer to the nose, I guess. And so Hiram goes down. And then Joseph Smith goes over to his brother and mourns over him, and then still has the ability to go to the window and give the Masonic shout for help. And then he gets shot by the mob, who's all of a sudden down at the bottom at the well there and shoots up at the window at him. He falls down, and then they blast a billion holes in him. And then supposedly John Taylor is no longer, when they're at the door, Hiram gets shot, Joseph goes over, John Taylor somehow is shot multiple times, and then goes cowering underneath the bed, which is clear across the room. So you're starting to see where the problems lie here in the story that the church is trying to present. And then Willard Richards. How did he get unshot? And how did Joseph get unshot? Because if they all left the door, as John Taylor goes under the bed, Joseph Smith goes to where Hiram has been shot, away from the door, that leaves Willard Richards alone to hold the door back from this mob that are trying to burst through the door. Unless you say, well, they gave up on the door and then went back outside to shoot from the ground floor up into the second floor. And that's the problem. When you start speculating to justify a position, rather than letting the evidence tell you the story. When you create a scenario to justify a story, that's unsound. You can't do that. It doesn't work in telling the truth of what actually happened. So I hope you understand now why Mormon apologetics is wrong. Because Mormon apologetics are the ones who are trying to create a story to explain the church's narrative. And so they then justify the second wound through Hiram, which was up through the jaw, by saying, well, it was when he was down on the ground having been shot in the face first, the rifles were now down on the lower end of the door. They'd crouched down, and they one shot through as he was lying down. Seriously? If you took the facts of the case, we can start with the hallway. The stairs are narrow. They only allow one person. It's, 2.5, 3 feet wide. So only one person is able to go up the stairs at a time. The others have to follow in line. And the hallway, there's a hallway right by the door with a banister by the stairs and the hallway that leads to a window at the front of the building when the room is adjoining. And again, it's a narrow hall, so there's 6 feet of patio space at the top of the stairs, at the base, or the top of the stairs. It's not the base. When you understand that a rifle was long back then, that the militia rifles specifically were long, and they were only single shots. Willard Richards is telling his story saying, bullets were shot all over the place through the door. It was chaos. Willard, are you telling your people back then that they're dumb? Because you can only shoot one at a time. And after you shoot once, you then have to put another ball in the chamber, tamp it down with the gunpowder, and then shoot again. That takes time. And so when the rifles are longer than 6 feet, especially with the bayonet at the end of them, the knife thing, you'd have to be up against the back of the wall doing this. You can't. Nobody does that. That's why they didn't take their rifles up with them, is because they knew they couldn't effectively shoot the rifles. And so they just went up as a mob up the stairs. And so the shot through the door was not a rifle shot. It's the size of a shotgun shell. They did not have, or a pistol, sorry. And so it was not a shotgun. And so it wasn't the mob. And then when you look at the door, and it's going to take me too long to do an actual video putting in all the pictures, but you can Google the image. They still have the door with the shot through it. Measure how high up the shot is, and then how tall Hyrum Smith was for this location to be shot right here through the door, which was down. He got shot in the chest, if he got shot at all. See, those are contradictions of evidence. And you can't justify them by saying it's fake news. That the church is telling the truth and we're going to trust the truth over the facts, the evidence. You just can't do that. The facts lead the story, not speculations to justify the claim. And so then you realize, okay, well, if everybody abandoned the door so that Hyrum could then be shot through this way, which is strange because it would have to be a downward angle, because his body would be defending this portion, unless he had a very long extended jaw, which wasn't the case. So again, you're starting to see problems with the apologists' justifications for the church's claim. And it just doesn't hold water. And so how did Joseph escape getting shot in the back? As everybody's abandoned the door, the mob would have rushed right in and immediately been, apparently, I guess they were shooting, because John Taylor got struck several times as he goes cowering under the bed, and Willard Richards goes hiding into the back corner to avoid detection. He disappeared. It's magic. And Joseph Smith is right there, midway through the room, in the doorway, with his back to the door. Back to the door? You know, with the mob there? You know, that's not typical human behavior. You first deal with the mob before you go to the wounded. That's a self-preservation human trait. And so for him to abandon the door, they all abandon the door, the mob rushing in the room, not shooting Joseph, but allowing Joseph to go to the window and be able to give that whole long spiel at the window, but then get shot by the mob who no longer is in the room but is now down at the well. So there's some problems. And then, of course, they try to say, well, there was a magic bullet. As they were shooting up to the second floor, the bullet went through the window and then changed directory. It's one of those smart bullets. And zigzagged around to hit John Taylor. Again, Mormons. You gotta look at the evidence. Let the evidence lead to the truth. And that's why I've told my story, and I've done it in a video, I've done it in books, but simply put, Joseph Smith had a 6-shooter. He gave my third great grandfather's single shooter to Hyrum. Joseph goes out to the top of the stairs. The mob comes up. He goes boom, boom, boom. I guess 3 guys got hit, according to the trial, and the mob goes rushing out because he's got a gun. They don't, and so they're outside going, "Oh my God, these guys are shot." And so then who shoots at John Taylor? The evidence then points to Joseph Smith shooting John Taylor. Why would he shoot John Taylor? Because Hiram just got shot. How did he get shot? He's got my 3rd great-grandfather's single shot. He didn't shoot himself. He was wrestling with John Taylor for the gun, and it went off. He got shot. And so then Joseph sees that, sees Hiram fall to the ground, sees John Taylor now with the gun, my 3rd great-grandfather's pistol. Joseph then has 3 more rounds, boom, boom, boom. One of them hits him in the watch, which is a pistol-size hole, not a rifle hole. Different sizes for the different ones. And so that's why John Taylor then goes running under the bed. So then Joseph goes into the room because the mob is no longer a threat. That's why he's able to shoot at John Taylor. That's why he's able to go over to Hiram, because he thinks he's chased out the mob. He's chased away John Taylor, thinking he's shot him. So he goes into the room, is over the body of Hiram, and then you can say, well, that's when he went over to the window and was shot. But then how did Hiram get shot right here? Somebody else had a gun in the room, a pistol. Willard Richards went out to get wine. That's apparently according to the receipt. That's evidence. They bought wine. But Willard Richards went out of the room because he was not under arrest. Talked with the guard. The guard place was downstairs. So he went downstairs, talked to the guard, said, "Hey, we'd like to buy some wine. Here's the $1 or $2 that Joseph gave him." And he brought back the wine and a pistol for Willard. Willard kept it a secret. Why would he do that? How did Joseph get the 6-shooter? Well, that's the Wheelock, I believe his name is, who comes after John Solomon Fulmer leaves, because Joseph told him, go get the militia to protect me, to get me to the jail. And doesn't get there in time with the militia. He's got to go all the way to Nauvoo. And so Wheelock comes over, gives Joseph the 6-shooter. Joseph gives the single shot to Hiram. They're the ones under arrest. They get the guns. When you look at the background of John Taylor and Willard Richards, they're both in Brigham Young's missionary quorum. Section 124 makes it very clear all the priesthood keys that they have are for preaching the gospel. It says keys of the kingdom, but you got to keep reading. The sentence doesn't end with a period. It continues by saying to preach the gospel to all the world. That's the keys that Brigham Young had. Just to preach the gospel as a missionary. That's the missionary quorum of 12. The administrative quorum of 12 was called the High Council. And so both John Taylor and Willard Richards were under the control of Brigham Young after the whole 1838 leadership crisis, as I refer to it as. That's when the Danites rose up and were chasing the leaders of the church out of their various quorums. And so David Whitmer gets threatened, and Thomas B. Marsh is chased out as he is disgusted with the Danites. So, yeah, I call that the leadership crisis. And I won't give you the whole history of how Brigham Young was in charge of the Danites, not Joseph. And that Brigham Young was a Scottish Rites Mason, not a York Rites Mason that the Smiths were. The church is confessing now that Joseph Sr. and Hiram were both Masons. They are not telling you that Sr. was a Master Mason. And that's significant to history. And that helps demonstrate what actually happened in Carthage jail. And then when you look at what happened after, who benefited from Joseph's death? Who took over a portion of the church? Brigham Young. They did not follow the instructions for succession Joseph set forth in section 107, which is currently in 107. It was a different chapter under Joseph Smith's 1835 Doctrine and Covenants. Under Brigham Young's Doctrine and Covenants, it was made section 107. And so instead, it was just Brigham Young and Sidney Rigdon who had a debate at a special conference in August. And the two of them spoke. I think even Lucy Mack spoke. But there was no vote that took place by the Melchizedek priesthood as outlined in section 107. It was a church conference where both sides presented their case. Sidney Rigdon just wanted to oversee the church. He didn't want to actually lead the church. And when you understand Sidney Rigdon wrote the Book of Mormon, that he was in on the whole thing from the beginning, so he knew what was really going on and why he only wanted to be an overseer. Then you understand that Brigham Young, when he only had keys to preach the gospel, then all of a sudden he now is a prophet, seer, and revelator, and he gives that prophet, seer, and revelator status to Willard Richards, who is made his counselor with his boyhood buddy Heber C. Kimball. Heber C. Kimball was a Master Mason in the Scottish Rites Lodge, for your information. And then John Taylor, in Brigham Young's now newly formed Quorum of the 12 as an administrative body, are also, along with the other 12 apostles, made prophets, seers, and revelators. So now you have a whole bunch of people who are made prophets, seers, and revelators after Joseph's death. Read over section 124. Joseph only gave he and Hiram prophet, seer, revelator status. Joseph had translator. Notice they don't say translator as their title in the sustainings at conference. They only say prophet, seer, revelator. They do not accept translator. interesting. And so the evidence clearly shows Brigham Young ordered John Taylor and Willard Richards to make sure Joseph and Hiram are murdered. When Joseph chased the mob out, that's when John Taylor moved to get the pistol from Hiram. And Willard made sure to have another pistol on hand as a backup. Because if they're going to kill him, you need a gun now that both Smith and Hiram have a gun. And when you let the facts lead the story, that tells you the truth. When you allow speculations to justify a claim, then you get all sorts of unreasonable scenarios. And then you have to create new justifications to explain contradictions. And that's just unsound. You can't do that in an argument. So I hope that helps you. So with the hundreds of billions scandal, if that's not getting you out of the church, I hope this will help to transition your thinking that the church is bad. They're not Joseph's church. They murdered Joseph for power, for gain. Murder to get gain. Remember that? So, hope that helps you as you transition out of the church. The religion, the core religion, the religion that Joseph was trying to restore, which came by the Egyptians, if you're not familiar, is good. It's sound. Alma 32. That's the process. Faith in the Word is to be planted, which means replicated, into fruit, which is the fulfillment of the Word. So if you get an idea in your head, I need to build a boat to sail to the promised land in America, you get the blueprints. And you have to actually make the boat according to the blueprints. All fruit has to conform to the seed. So, all right.